Some mistakes don't ruin your life right away. Some of them wait till the next morning. Rain hit the sidewalk hard enough to blur the city lights into streaks of gold and white, and by the time my shift at Bellamy Books Cafe finally ended, my sneakers were already soaked through. It was almost midnight. The kind of New York night that made everyone walk faster and look down instead of at each other. I remember pulling my coat tighter as I stepped out beneath the flickering green awning, breathing in cold air mixed with exhaust smoke and wet pavement. A taxi splashed through a puddle beside me. Someone cursed from across the street. Somewhere above me, a siren echoed between buildings. Normal city noise, normal lonely night. Then I heard the ringing. At first I thought it was coming from inside the cafe, but it kept going. Sharp, expensive sounding somehow. I turned and spotted it, half hidden near the curb, beneath the bench outside the bookstore. A black phone, sleek, new, rainwater sliding across the screen. I should have ignored it. In this city, touching something that doesn't belong to you usually means trouble. But the phone kept ringing, and for some reason, I picked it up. Unknown number. I hesitated before answering. Hello? The voice on the other end sounded breathless. Male. Panicked. Who is this? I just found this phone. Silence. Then the man lowered his voice, instantly. Where are you? Something about the question made my stomach tighten. I glanced around the empty sidewalk. Outside Bellamy Books Cafe on Lexington. More silence. I could hear traffic in the background on his end. Doors slamming. Men talking. Then finally, don't let him die. The call disconnected. I stared at the screen. Rain dripped from my hair onto my sleeve, while another call immediately started coming in. Different number, then another, and another. The names flashing across the screen meant nothing to me, but every single one sounded serious. Luca, Vincent, Romano. One contact was simply labeled driver. Another, East Docks. I swallowed hard. The wallpaper on the lock screen was black. No photo, no smile, no family picture. Just a silver crest I didn't recognize. I told myself to put the phone back down and walk away. That should have been the smart thing. Instead, I opened the emergency contacts. One address kept repeating in recent messages. Moretti Holdings. Midtown, Manhattan. I knew the building. Everybody did. 48 floors of mirrored glass and silent money. The kind of place where men in $1,000 suits never smiled. I almost laughed at myself for even considering it. A bookstore cashier delivering a lost phone to some billionaire executive in the middle of the night. Ridiculous. But another message appeared on the screen before it locked again. Where is M.R. Moretti? My chest tightened. Mr. Moretti. Even the text sounded important. Dangerous, maybe. I should have gone home. Instead, 20 minutes later, I found myself sitting in the back of another taxi, clutching the phone inside both hands, while rain blurred the city outside the windows. Midtown looked different after midnight. Colder, cleaner. Like the city had secrets it only showed certain people. When the cab finally stopped in front of Moretti Holdings, I instantly regretted coming. 2 black SUVs sat outside the entrance. Men in dark coats stood beneath the building lights, watching every passing car without speaking. One of them noticed me immediately. Noticed the phone, too. He walked toward the cab before I could even open the door fully. Tall. Broad shoulders. Earpiece. The kind of man who made you lower your voice automatically. Where did you get that? He asked. I stepped out slowly, trying not to look nervous. I found it outside my job. His eyes narrowed. Who touched it? Just me. He held out his hand. Give it to me. I almost did. But before I could move, another black car pulled up behind the SUVs. The entire sidewalk changed. I felt it instantly. The guards straightened. One man stepped aside to open the rear passenger door without being asked, and suddenly nobody was looking at me anymore. They were looking at him. Adrian Moretti stepped out into the rain wearing a charcoal overcoat darkened by water across the shoulders. Tall, calm, one hand tucked into his pocket. The city noise somehow felt quieter around him. I couldn't explain it then. I still can't completely explain it now. He didn't look like the men you see in movies pretending to be dangerous. He looked worse, controlled. The kind of man who never needed to raise his voice because everyone else already knew not to test him. His jaw was tense. A faint cut marked one side of his brow. Rain slid down the side of his face while one of the guards moved quickly toward him, speaking in low Italian. Adrian barely reacted. Then his eyes lifted toward me. Not the phone, me. And for a second, nobody on that sidewalk moved. I remember my pulse thudding so loudly I thought someone else might hear it. He walked closer slowly. Expensive leather shoes splashing through rainwater. Cold, gray eyes locked onto mine. "You answered it," he said quietly. His voice surprised me most. Calm, deep, tired. I nodded once. I just wanted to return it. Another silence. Heavy this time. The kind that makes you aware of your own breathing. Adrian glanced at the phone, still in my hands, then back at me again like he was trying to understand something that didn't make sense to him. Finally, he reached for it. Our fingers brushed for less than a second. Cold skin, gold watch, steady hand. "What's your name?" he asked. I should have lied. God, I wish I had. But instead, I answered him honestly. Claire. His eyes stayed on mine another moment too long. Then he gave the smallest nod. "Thank you, Claire." I thought that was the end of it. I really did. I had no idea that less than 12 hours later, Adrian Moretti would walk into my workplace like a storm that had finally decided where to land. The strange thing about fear is that sometimes your body notices it before your mind does. I barely slept after meeting Adrian Moretti. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw rain sliding down his face beneath those city lights. Saw the way grown men moved around him without speaking. Saw the way his eyes stayed on mine like he was trying to memorize something. By 6:30 the next morning, I was already unlocking the front doors of Bellamy Books Cafe with tired hands and a headache building behind my eyes. Manhattan looked softer in the mornings, less dangerous somehow. Steam rising from street grates. Yellow taxis lined up beside the curb. Business people carrying coffees like armor. I kept telling myself last night had been nothing. A random encounter. Rich man loses phone. Girl returns it. End of story. But my stomach still felt tight. "You look awful," my coworker Jenna said as she tied her apron behind the counter. "Thanks. You always know exactly what to say to a woman." She laughed while turning on the espresso machine. Late night, if only she knew. Something like that. The cafe slowly filled with the usual morning crowd. Lawyers, students, a man who ordered the same double espresso every day without ever looking up from his phone. Normal people, safe people. I tried focusing on work, grinding coffee beans, wiping tables, restocking pastries behind the glass display. But every time the front door opened, my eyes lifted, automatically, like part of me expected something. Around 9:15, the entire cafe suddenly went quiet. Not completely. The music was still playing overhead, cups still clinked, but conversations lowered all at once, like invisible air had been pulled from the room. I looked up from the register, black SUV outside, then another one pulling in behind it. My pulse stopped for half a second. "Claire," Jenna whispered beside me. "Why are there security guys outside?" 3 men stepped onto the sidewalk wearing dark coats and earpieces. Not loud, not aggressive. Somehow that made them more intimidating. Customers near the windows started pretending not to stare. Then the back passenger door opened. Adrian Moretti stepped out wearing a charcoal gray suit beneath a long black coat, one hand adjusting the cuff of his sleeve while cold morning wind moved through his dark hair. The entire street seemed to slow. around him. I hated that I noticed details like that. Hated that my chest tightened the second I saw him again. He looked different in daylight, sharper somehow, more dangerous. Last night he had looked tired. This morning he looked untouchable. One of the guards opened the cafe door before Adrian even reached it. A gust of cold air swept inside. Nobody spoke. Adrian walked in slowly, eyes moving across the room once before landing directly on me behind the counter. And somehow that felt worse than if he had smiled. Because he did not smile. He just looked at me like he had already decided something. Jenna leaned closer to me immediately. Oh my God. I wanted to tell her to stop staring, but honestly, I could not stop staring either. Adrian approached the counter, while every customer nearby suddenly became deeply interested in their drinks. His shoes barely made noise against the wooden floor. Expensive watch, dark tie, calm expression. The kind of man who probably had people lying for him before he even asked. He stopped in front of me, close enough for me to catch the faint scent of cedar and rain still lingering on his coat. "Claire," he said. My name sounded different in his voice, lower, slower, like he was testing how it felt to say it. "Mr. Moretti." I instantly regretted how nervous I sounded. One corner of his mouth moved slightly, not quite a smile. "Adrian." My hands tightened around the dish towel I was holding. "What are you doing here?" "I came to thank you properly." Every instinct told me half the cafe was listening. "You already thanked me." "Not adequately." His gaze moved briefly across the cafe behind me. The bookshelves, the small tables, the overworked espresso machine hissing steam, then back to me again. "This is where you work every morning?" I nodded carefully. "Most mornings." Another silence settled between us. Not awkward, heavy, like standing too close to a thunderstorm. One of the businessmen sitting near the window suddenly stood up and left without finishing his coffee. Adrian barely noticed. He reached inside his coat slowly and placed a cream-colored envelope on the counter between us. Thick. Too thick. "I cannot accept that," I said immediately. "You have not even looked inside." "I still cannot accept it." His eyes lifted back to mine. Calm. Curious now. Almost confused. Most people would. Most people probably know who you are before talking to you. Something shifted in his expression then. Tiny, but real. Like I had said something nobody usually dared say out loud. Behind me, Jenna looked seconds away from passing out. Adrian glanced down at the envelope for a moment, before sliding it back into his coat without argument. No irritation, no pressure. Somehow that unsettled me more. "You returned something valuable to me," he said quietly. "That deserves acknowledgement." It was just a phone. His eyes stayed on mine. "No, Claire." His voice dropped lower. "It was not." I did not know what that meant. And, honestly, I was not sure I wanted to know. Outside, another black SUV pulled up beside the curb. One of the security men approached the window quickly, speaking into an earpiece with urgency I could feel even through the glass. Adrian noticed immediately. The atmosphere around him changed in seconds. Subtle, controlled, but colder somehow. Like whatever softness existed when he spoke to me disappeared behind locked doors. He glanced toward the window once, then back at me. I should go. Relief should have been the first thing I felt. Instead, disappointment brushed through me so quickly it embarrassed. Adrian adjusted the sleeve of his coat again before stepping back from the counter. "You should not walk home alone tonight," he said calmly. My stomach tightened. "Why?" He held my gaze for one quiet second too long. "Because New York becomes dangerous after dark." Then he turned and walked out of the cafe while every pair of eyes followed him. The room stayed silent until the SUVs disappeared into traffic, and only then did Jenna grab my arm hard enough to nearly spill my coffee. "Claire," she whispered. "Who the hell was that?" The terrifying part was that I was starting to realize I did not actually want to know the answer anymore. The worst part was not that Adrian Moretti scared me. The worst part was realizing part of me wanted to see him again. For the next 3 days, I tried convincing myself that my life had gone back to normal. I worked morning shifts at Bellamy Books Cafe. I rode the subway home to my apartment in Queens. I reheated leftover pasta at midnight while pretending not to think about a man whose name made entire rooms quieter. But New York has strange ways of letting you know when something has changed. It started with small things, tiny things, the kind you almost feel stupid noticing. On Thursday night, the subway station near my apartment suddenly had 2 police officers standing near the entrance for the first time in months. Friday morning, the homeless man who usually screamed outside my block was gone. Saturday afternoon, the old security camera above the deli downstairs had been replaced with a brand new one. I told myself none of it meant anything. I wanted none of it to mean anything. "You are distracted again," Jenna said while sliding pastries into the display case. "I am tired." "No. You are thinking about tall, terrifying billionaire man." I nearly dropped the coffee pot in my hand. "He is not a billionaire." She stared at me. "Claire, he arrived here with enough security to invade a small country." I tried ignoring her, but honestly, she was not wrong. Since Adrian walked into the cafe, everybody had become slightly obsessed with him. Customers whispered. My manager suddenly cared about polishing the front windows. Even Jenna had started wearing lipstick to work again, just in case. Meanwhile, I had spent the last 72 hours trying very hard not to replay his voice in my head. "You should not walk home alone tonight." I hated how calm he sounded when he said things like that, like danger was simply part of the weather to him. Around 6 that evening, my shift finally ended. Rain clouds hung low over the city again, turning the streets silver beneath traffic lights. I wrapped my scarf tighter while stepping outside with Jenna beside me. "You want to grab dinner?" she asked. "I cannot. Rent is due next week. One day you are going to let someone take care of you." I laughed softly. That sounds terrifying. Depends who. We started walking toward the subway entrance together before Jenna suddenly slowed beside me. "Claire." Her voice changed instantly. I looked up. Black sedan across the street, parked beside the curb with headlights glowing against the rain. My stomach tightened immediately. "No," I whispered. Jenna grabbed my arm hard enough to wrinkle my sleeve. "That is him, right?" The back passenger door opened slowly. Adrian stepped out wearing a dark wool coat over a black dress shirt, one hand adjusting his cuff while cold wind moved through his hair. No tie tonight. Somehow that made him look even more dangerous. Less polished, more real. Traffic continued around him, people crossing intersections, taxis honking, city noise everywhere. Yet somehow my entire focus narrowed directly onto him anyway. Adrian glanced once toward the cafe windows before his eyes found mine standing beneath the bookstore awning. And just like that, I forgot what Jenna had been saying. He crossed the street calmly, while rain tapped against the sidewalk around us. One of his security men remained near the car, watching the block carefully without interfering. Adrian stopped a few feet away from me, close enough that I noticed faint shadows beneath his eyes tonight, like he had not slept much either. Jenna looked between us once, before immediately stepping backward. I suddenly remembered I have somewhere else to be. "Jenna," I hissed. "Nice meeting you," she told Adrian much too quickly, before disappearing down the sidewalk like her life depended on it. Coward. Adrian watched her leave for exactly half a second before looking back at me again. "Your friend dislikes me. She is afraid of you." One corner of his mouth moved slightly. "And you?" Rainwater slid from the edge of the awning beside us, while my pulse hammered harder than it should have. "I have not decided yet." His eyes held mine another second too long. There it was again. That silence between us that somehow felt louder than conversation. "What are you doing here?" I finally asked. I was nearby, with 3 security vehicles. Adrian glanced briefly toward the black sedan. Occupational habit. I folded my arms tighter against the cold. "You keep appearing places unexpectedly. Does that bother you?" The honest answer should have been yes. Instead, I said, "I think I am still trying to understand why." Adrian studied me quietly. Not my clothes, not my face exactly. Something deeper than that. Like he was trying to solve a puzzle nobody else noticed. "Most people want something from me," he said finally. "Money, access, influence." His voice remained calm, but something tired moved beneath it. "You did not." "Because I found your phone? Because you returned it without asking who I was first?" I did not know what to say to that. Across the street, headlights reflected against rain-slick pavement, while pedestrians rushed home beneath umbrellas. The city moved around us, normally. But standing there beside Adrian Moretti never felt normal. It felt like standing too close to the edge of something huge, dangerous. Claire. The way he said my name again made my chest tighten unexpectedly. "I would like to take you to dinner." I blinked. "What?" "Dinner." Calm, direct. Like the idea had already existed in his mind for days. As gratitude. People usually say thank you with gift cards. Another almost smile appeared briefly before disappearing again. I am not most people. No. He definitely was not. I looked toward the waiting black sedan, then back at him standing beneath Manhattan rain, looking like the kind of man newspapers probably wrote about carefully. The smart answer was no. Every instinct I had screamed no. But before I could speak, a motorcycle suddenly roared past the intersection, much too fast, tires splashing water across the curb near us. Adrian reacted instantly. One arm moved around my waist, pulling me backward against him before the dirty water could hit us. Everything inside me stopped breathing for one impossible second. Warm hand against my coat, steady grip, the scent of rain and cedar again. Adrian looked down at me while city lights reflected softly in his gray eyes. And that was the exact moment I realized I was already in trouble. Nobody warns you that the most dangerous men can also be the gentlest for exactly 3 seconds at a time. Adrian removed his hand from my waist almost immediately after the motorcycle disappeared into traffic, but somehow the warmth of it stayed behind anyway. Rain continued falling softly around us, while headlights painted silver reflections across the wet sidewalk. Neither of us moved at first. I became painfully aware of everything, my pulse, my breathing, the fact that his hand had fit perfectly against the small of my back like it belonged there, which was ridiculous, completely ridiculous. Adrian looked down at me quietly, his expression unreadable beneath the glow of the streetlights. "Are you hurt?" The question sounded strangely personal coming from him. I shook my head too quickly. "No." He gave a small nod, but his eyes lingered on me another second before finally stepping back. The distance should have made me feel safer. Instead, I noticed it immediately. "You should let my driver take you home," he said calmly. "That is not necessary." "Claire," my name again, low and steady. "It is raining, it is late, and Manhattan is not kind to women walking alone at night. I have lived here 6 years. Then you already know I am right." I hated that he was right. More than that, I hated that part of me liked hearing concern in his voice. One of his security men opened an umbrella nearby, waiting without interrupting. Everything around Adrian worked with silent precision. Nobody questioned him. Nobody delayed him. I wondered what that felt like. To move through the world knowing people would rearrange themselves for you automatically. "Dinner," Adrian said again. "Tomorrow night." Not really a question this time. I crossed my arms tighter against the cold. You always this persistent? Only when something matters to me. The words hit harder than they should have. Rainwater slid down the side of his coat, while traffic rolled behind him in streaks of red and white. New York looked cinematic around Adrian Moretti, like the city itself understood who he was. I barely know you, I said quietly. That can change. You are avoiding every actual question I ask. One eyebrow lifted slightly. Am I? You never explain anything. What would you like explained? I stared at him for a second. Why does everyone act terrified around you? His expression did not change. If anything, he became even calmer. Fear is useful in certain industries. That is not an answer. It is the only one I am giving tonight. Honest, direct, frustrating. I exhaled, slowly, watching my breath disappear into the cold air. I muttered, normal people usually introduce themselves before mysteriously appearing outside someone's workplace every few days. Normal people usually do not return phones worth several $1,000,000 without asking for anything. I blinked. Excuse me? Adrian almost looked amused by my reaction now. Almost. There was sensitive information on that device. What kind of information? Silence. There it was again, that wall behind his eyes. Thick, permanent, built long before he ever met me. The kind people kill for? I asked, before I could stop myself. Adrian studied me carefully. You watch too many movies, which was definitely not a denial. A black umbrella suddenly appeared over my head. I looked up in surprise before realizing one of his security men had stepped closer without a sound. Adrian noticed my discomfort immediately. Give us a minute, he told the man quietly. The umbrella disappeared at once. No argument, no hesitation. That should not have impressed me as much as it did. You should not be nice to me, I said softly, before thinking better of it. Adrian's gaze sharpened slightly. Why? Because men like you are usually not nice without a reason. The city noise seemed quieter for one strange second. Adrian slipped one hand into his coat pocket, while rain darkened the edges of his sleeves. And what kind of man do you think I am, Claire? Dangerous, lonely, the kind that changes your life, accidentally. But I only said, I do not know yet. He nodded once, slowly, like that answer interested him more than any compliment could have. A taxi splashed through the intersection nearby while cold wind moved between the buildings. I suddenly realized how late it had gotten. I should go home. Adrian glanced toward the black sedan waiting at the curb. My driver will take you. I can take the subway. No. The word came calm, immediate, final, not angry, worse, certain. I stared at him. You really are used to people listening to you. Usually for good reason. That sounds arrogant. That sounds experienced. I should have argued long. Instead, 20 minutes later, I found myself sitting in the back of a luxury sedan that smelled faintly like leather and cedar, while Manhattan lights blurred past the windows. Adrian sat across from me, silent for most of the drive, occasionally glancing down at messages appearing on his phone screen. Every few minutes someone called him. He never answered. You ignore people a lot, I finally said. Most conversations waste time. That is a very depressing philosophy. And yet, you are still talking to me. I looked out the window to hide the smile threatening to appear. Dangerous men should not have dry humor. It made them harder to avoid. When the car finally stopped outside my apartment building in Queens, Adrian looked toward the old brick entrance with quiet focus. The neighborhood suddenly seemed smaller through his eyes. Older, less safe. You live here alone? That sounds like another question you should not ask strangers. Another almost smile, brief, gone quickly. One of his security men stepped out first to open my door, but Adrian spoke before I could leave. Tomorrow, 8 o'clock. I looked back at him. You are assuming I said yes. You did not say no. Fair point. I stepped out onto the sidewalk, cold air rushing against my face again. Adrian remained inside the car, one arm resting calmly beside him while city light reflected across his watch. Powerful men in expensive cars were not supposed to look lonely, yet somehow he did. "Good night, Claire," he said, quietly, through the open door. I swallowed once. "Good night, Adrian." The sedan disappeared into traffic seconds later, black taillights fading into Queens nightlife. I stood there for another moment beneath the street lamp outside my building, trying to ignore the strange feeling settling in my chest. Then I noticed someone watching from across the street. A man leaning beside a parked car in a dark jacket. The second our eyes met, he looked away too quick, and suddenly Adrian's warning from the cafe no longer sounded dramatic at all. You can feel someone watching you long before you ever prove it. The man across the street disappeared the second I looked at him directly. One moment he was leaning against the parked car beneath the street lamp. The next, he pushed away casually and vanished into the moving crowd near the corner deli like he had never been there at all. I stood frozen outside my apartment building with cold rain collecting on my coat sleeves while Adrian's black sedan disappeared farther down the block. Maybe it was nothing. New York was full of strange people, full of tired men standing outside buildings at midnight. But something deep in my stomach told me not to dismiss it so easily. I finally forced myself upstairs to my apartment on the 4th floor. The radiator hissed loudly beside the window while distant sirens echoed somewhere beyond Queens Boulevard. Usually, I loved sounds like that. They reminded me I lived in a real city, a living one. But tonight, every sound felt sharper somehow, like my world had quietly tilted without asking permission first. I locked my apartment door twice before setting my keys down on the kitchen counter. Then I noticed it, a paper bag sitting outside my bedroom door. My heartbeat jumped immediately. I knew I had not left anything there before work. Slowly, I stepped closer. No name, no note. Just warm food inside from the Italian restaurant downstairs that normally closed before 10. Fresh pasta, garlic bread, a bottled sparkling water. Still warm. My chest tightened instantly. Adrian. It had to be Adrian. Nobody else even knew where I lived. I should have been angry. Honestly, I tried to be angry, because somehow that meant he either followed me home or had someone else do it for him. Both options should have terrified me. Instead, I found myself standing barefoot in my tiny kitchen at 1 a.m, eating expensive pasta while rain tapped softly against my apartment window and thinking about the way Adrian looked at me when he said my name, which was absolutely pathetic. The next morning, I woke to sunlight slipping through the blinds and 3 missed calls from Jenna. The second I answered, she practically screamed into the phone. "You went home with him?" I groaned into my pillow. "Why are you yelling at 8:30 in the morning?" "Claire Bennett, there are already TikTok videos about that man showing up at the cafe." I sat upright instantly. "What?" "Some customer filmed his security team outside." Fantastic. Exactly what I needed. Internet strangers becoming invested in my terrible decisions. "Nothing happened," I muttered while rubbing sleep from my eyes. "We just talked." Jenna made a dramatic sound. "The terrifying rich man with gray eyes drove you home personally after asking you to dinner." When she said it like that, it sounded significantly worse. "You are overreacting." "No, you are underreacting." Maybe she was right. Because despite everything logical screaming in my head, I still found myself thinking about 8 o'clock tonight, about dinner, about Adrian. The entire subway ride into Manhattan felt strange. I kept noticing people around me more than usual. A man standing too close near the train doors, someone watching me briefly before looking away. By the time I reached Bellamy Books Cafe, my nerves already felt stretched thin. "You look like somebody chased you here," Jenna whispered, while handing me an apron. "I am fine. Liar. Maybe." Around noon, the lunch rush finally slowed enough for me to breathe again. I carried a tray of empty cups toward the kitchen when the front cafe door opened hard enough to rattle the bell overhead. A man in a navy suit walked inside, looking irritated and very wealthy, late 40s. Expensive watch, loud voice, the kind of customer who treated minimum wage workers like furniture. Finally, he snapped while approaching the counter. I ordered 20 minutes ago. Jenna blinked at him calmly. Sir, your sandwich is coming out now. This place is unbelievable. He slammed his palm against the counter hard enough to make the tip jar shake. Conversations nearby immediately quieted. I felt my stomach tighten. I have meetings downtown. Do you know who I am? No, Jenna said flatly. And honestly, that usually means life is better. I almost laughed, despite the tension. Big mistake. The man turned toward me instantly. Something funny? His tone changed completely. Sharper now. The cafe suddenly felt too small. No, sir, I answered carefully. He stepped closer anyway. Then maybe smile less when customers are speaking. Before I could respond, another voice cut through the room. Calm, cold. I believe she answered you already. Every muscle in my body locked instantly. Adrian stood near the entrance wearing a black overcoat over dark gray slacks, rain still clinging lightly to his shoulders from outside. 2 security men remained near the door behind him, silent as statues. The businessman turned immediately, irritation disappearing so fast it almost looked painful. Mr. Moretti. Adrian walked closer, slowly, his eyes never leaving the man in front of the counter. You are upsetting the staff. The businessman swallowed hard. There seems to be a misunderstanding. No, Adrian said quietly. I understand perfectly. Silence spread across the cafe again. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed too loudly. Adrian stopped beside me without looking directly at me, yet somehow becoming completely aware of my presence anyway. The businessman straightened his jacket nervously. I did not realize this cafe belonged to you. Adrian finally looked at him then. Calm, gray eyes. Expression unreadable. It does not. Somehow that answer sounded even worse. The man apologized quickly after that. Too quickly. He grabbed his coffee and left within seconds without another complaint. The second the door closed behind him, the entire cafe seemed to inhale again. Jenna stared openly at Adrian like she was witnessing organized crime in designer shoes. Adrian ignored everyone except me. Are you all right? The question softened his voice slightly, barely, but enough for me to notice. I am fine. Good. He glanced once toward the window, where rain had started falling again outside. You still owe me an answer about dinner. My pulse betrayed me instantly. You really do not give up. No, Adrian admitted calmly. I do not. And standing there beneath the warm cafe lights while Manhattan rain darkened the windows behind him, I realized something terrifying. Part of me was starting to like that about him. The problem with crossing paths with powerful people is that eventually you stop recognizing where your own life ends and theirs begins. I spent the entire afternoon pretending Adrian Moretti did not affect me, which became significantly harder after he walked into my workplace, looking like a man who could make problems disappear just by noticing them. Jenna watched me clean the espresso machine for almost 30 seconds before finally speaking. You are smiling at nothing. I stopped immediately. I am not. Claire. She leaned both elbows onto the counter dramatically. That man looks at you like he is trying to solve religion. I nearly choked on my own coffee. Please never say that sentence again. You like him. I barely know him. That is not a denial. Unfortunately, she was right. Worse, I knew she was right. The terrifying part was not Adrian's money or influence, or the fact that entire rooms changed when he entered them. It was the way he paid attention, completely. Most people only listened while waiting for their turn to speak. Adrian watched like every word mattered, like every expression meant something. That kind of attention was dangerous, especially for someone like. By 7:30 that evening, rain had finally stopped. leaving Manhattan shining beneath blurred city lights and passing taxis. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror inside my tiny apartment for almost 10 minutes trying to decide if agreeing to dinner with Adrian was the worst idea I had ever had. Probably. Definitely, actually. Yet, somehow, I still changed outfits 3 times anyway. Pathetic. I finally settled on a simple black sweater dress and boots that made me feel slightly more confident than I actually was. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that looked like I had spent an hour panicking in front of a mirror because a dangerous man with gray eyes asked me to dinner. At exactly 8 o'clock, headlights appeared outside my building. Of course they did. Adrian seemed like the type of man who arrived exactly on time everywhere. I took one last breath before heading downstairs. The black sedan waited beside the curb while cold night air carried the smell of rain and traffic through Queens. One of Adrian's security men opened the back passenger door for me immediately. Miss Bennett. Still weird. Everything about this was weird. I slid into the back seat and instantly noticed Adrian sitting beside the opposite window, wearing a dark charcoal suit with no tie, again, one hand resting loosely against his knee while Manhattan lights moved across his face. He looked tired tonight, beautifully composed, but tired underneath it. "You came," he said quietly. "You sound surprised. Most people are intimidated by me. That sounds exhausting." A faint, almost, smile appeared, briefly. Sometimes. The car pulled smoothly into traffic while soft instrumental music played low through hidden speakers. I glanced around the interior nervously. Leather seats, soft lighting, everything expensive without trying too hard. "Do you always travel like a president?" Adrian looked out the window, calmly. "Occupational necessity. You keep saying things like that without explaining anything, and yet you still accepted dinner." Fair point again. I hated how good he was at that. Manhattan rose around us in silver towers and glowing windows while the city transformed into something cinematic at night. Adrian stayed quiet most of the drive, occasionally checking messages appearing on his phone screen before locking it again almost instantly. Whatever world he belonged to clearly never stopped moving. "Do you ever rest?" I asked, finally. His eyes lifted toward me. "Rarely." "That cannot be healthy. Neither is coffee for dinner." I blinked. "How do you know I do that?" Silence. Tiny. Dangerous. Then Adrian answered carefully. "You mentioned it yesterday." No, I had not. My heartbeat slowed strangely. He noticed my expression immediately. "You are uncomfortable. Should I be?" Adrian held my gaze for a long moment before shaking his head once. "No." The answer should have reassured me more than it did. 20 minutes later, the sedan stopped outside a private restaurant overlooking the Hudson River. Floor-to-ceiling windows reflected city lights across dark water while suited employees hurried to open doors before Adrian even stepped out of the car. Nobody greeted him normally. They greeted him carefully, respectfully, like they already knew disappointing him was not an option. Inside, the restaurant glowed with warm amber lighting and quiet piano music. Conversation softened as Adrian walked through the room beside me. I noticed people recognizing him instantly without openly staring. Men nodded subtly. Women watched too long before looking away. Adrian ignored all of it. His attention remained completely on me. A private table waited near the windows overlooking the river. Candles flickered softly between crystal glasses, while New York shimmered outside like another universe entirely. "This place is insane," I whispered before sitting down. Adrian pulled out my chair himself before taking the seat across from me. "You dislike it?" "No, I just usually eat dinner over my sink at midnight." That earned a real reaction. Small, but real. "That sounds depressing. Welcome to New York rent prices." For the first time since meeting him, Adrian actually smiled slightly. It changed his entire face. Softer somehow. More human. Which honestly scared me more than the cold version of him. Because suddenly I understood how dangerous charm became when attached to someone powerful. A waiter appeared almost instantly, with wine menus. But Adrian spoke before the man could finish. Sparkling water for her. He glanced toward me briefly. Unless you prefer something else. The fact that he asked mattered more than it should have. Water is fine. The waiter vanished silently. Everything around Adrian moved like choreography. Perfect timing. Perfect control. People seem afraid of disappointing you, I said quietly, once we were alone again. Adrian leaned back slightly in his chair, city lights reflecting in his gray eyes. Fear motivates efficiency. That sounds lonely. Something flickered across his expression too quickly for me to fully read it. Gone almost immediately. You say whatever you are thinking, usually to my own disadvantage. I noticed. Another silence settled between us. Not awkward. Heavy, in a different way now. Slower. More personal. Then Adrian's phone lit up beside his hand. One message. Brief. I saw his expression change instantly. Not anger. Worse. Focus. Cold focus. He locked the screen immediately, but not before I accidentally caught 3 words glowing across it. She was, followed again. My stomach dropped. Adrian looked back at me calmly like nothing had happened. But suddenly I understood something terrifying. The strange man outside my apartment was not an accident, and Adrian Moretti already knew about him before I did. There is a moment when curiosity turns into fear. Mine happened over, sparkling water and candlelight. I tried pretending I had not seen the message on Adrian's phone. Maybe I misunderstood it. Maybe it had nothing to do with me. But the problem with fear is that once it enters a room, it changes the shape of everything inside it. Suddenly the candlelight between us felt dimmer. The restaurant felt quieter. Adrian looked the same as before, calm, controlled, elegant in that dangerous way only certain men could be. Yet now I could not stop noticing details I had ignored earlier. The security guard near the private entrance, wearing an earpiece. The way the restaurant staff avoided interrupting Adrian unless absolutely necessary. The fact that his phone never stayed silent for more than a few minutes at a time. You are thinking too loudly, Adrian said quietly from across the table. I blinked. What? Your expression changes when you are nervous. Of course, he noticed that too. I folded my hands together carefully to stop myself from fidgeting. I saw the message on your phone. Adrian did not react immediately. He simply leaned back slightly in his chair while city lights shimmered beyond the restaurant windows behind him. You should not have. That is not exactly reassuring. Another silence settled between us. Heavy now. Different from before. Adrian's gaze remained steady on mine. Claire. His voice lowered slightly. There are aspects of my life that are complicated. Complicated enough that people follow me home. The muscles along his jaw tightened almost invisibly. Tiny movement. But I saw it. I told you New York becomes dangerous after dark. That was not an answer either. The waiter approached quietly with our food before immediately sensing the tension and retreating almost as fast. Neither of us touched our plates right away. Adrian looked at me for a long moment before finally speaking again. You are safe. You cannot promise that. Actually, he said calmly, I can. That should not have sounded as frightening as it did. I stared at him across the candlelight, trying to understand what kind of man spoke with that level of certainty. Not confidence. Certainty. Who are you really? I asked softly. Adrian's eyes darkened slightly. That depends who is asking. Do not do that. Do what? Answer questions like some mysterious character in a movie. To my surprise, that almost made him smile again. You dislike mystery. I dislike feeling manipulated. The word lingered between us. Manipulated. Adrian became very still after that. Not angry. Worse. Focused. You think I am manipulating you? I think powerful men are used to controlling situations. And you dislike losing control. Does anybody enjoy it? His gaze stayed locked on mine, while the piano music drifted softly through the restaurant around us. No, he admitted quietly. Not usually. Uh, Outside, rain started again against the glass windows overlooking the Hudson. Slow, steady. New York looked beautiful from up here, distant enough to forget how dangerous it could become. Adrian finally picked up his glass of water. I did not intend for your life to become complicated. That sounds like it already has. Silence again. That silence was becoming our language, somehow. Claire, Adrian said carefully, if I ask you to trust me, would you? I almost laughed. You have not given me many reasons to. I brought you here because I wanted one evening where nobody looked at me with fear. The honesty in his voice caught me completely off guard. Adrian looked away briefly toward the rain-dark windows. Do you know how exhausting it is when every room changes the second you walk into it? I watched him quietly. For the first time since meeting him, he sounded less like a powerful man and more like a lonely one. People respect you, I said softly. Adrian's expression remained unreadable. Fear and respect are often confused. Something about that sentence stayed with me, because suddenly I realized Adrian probably spent most of his life surrounded by people who obeyed him without ever truly knowing him. Men who feared him, women who wanted things from him, employees who measured every word carefully. And somehow, for reasons I still did not understand, he had chosen to sit here with me instead. A bookstore cafe cashier from Queens, wearing boots, bought on clearance. You still have not answered my question, I murmured. Adrian looked back at me slowly. Which one? Why me? The rain outside intensified softly against the glass. Adrian studied my face in complete silence before finally answering. Because when you looked at me that night, you did not see Adrian Moretti. His voice lowered slightly. You saw a man standing alone in the rain. My chest tightened unexpectedly. Nobody had ever spoken to me like that before. Honest without trying to impress me. Dangerous without threatening me. The problem was that I could feel myself starting to care. And caring about men like Adrian Moretti seemed like the kind of mistake women regretted for years. His phone vibrated again against the table. This time, Adrian looked irritated before even checking it. He unlocked the screen briefly, one message, then another immediately after. I saw his expression change again, colder now, more alert. I need to leave, he said quietly. My stomach tightened instantly. What happened? Adrian stood smoothly from the table while reaching for his coat. Nothing you need to worry about. That sentence usually means the opposite. For 1 second, his eyes softened toward me again. You should go home tonight and lock your door. Fear moved coldly through my chest. Adrian. He stepped closer to my side of the table then, lowering his voice enough that nobody nearby could hear. Listen to me carefully, Claire. His gray eyes locked onto mine completely. If anyone approaches you, anyone, you call the number I gave you immediately. I stared up at him. What is happening? Adrian hesitated for the first time since I met him. Actual hesitation. Then finally he answered quietly. Some people noticed that I keep coming back to you. The air left my lungs slowly. Suddenly, the elegant restaurant did not feel safe anymore. Neither did the city outside. Adrian brushed 2 fingers lightly against my wrist before stepping away again. Brief, gentle, almost accidental. Yet my pulse reacted instantly anyway. I am sorry, he said softly. Then Adrian Moretti turned and walked out of the restaurant, surrounded by silent security, while I remained frozen beside the candlelit table, realizing something terrifying. I no longer knew whether Adrian was the danger in my life or the only thing protecting me from it. Sometimes danger does not arrive loudly. Sometimes it slips quietly into your life until you realize you have not felt safe in days. I barely remember leaving the restaurant after Adrian disappeared into the rain with his security team. One moment, he was standing beside my chair telling me to lock my doors. The next, he was gone. Just gone. Like storms passing through cities. Fast, heavy, impossible to hold on to. The driver took me home in silence while Manhattan blurred outside the windows in silver reflections and red brake lights. I kept replaying Adrian's words in my head over and over. Some people noticed that I keep coming back to you. The terrifying part was how serious he sounded. Not dramatic, not protective, in an exaggerated movie star way. Serious. Like he genuinely believed I was in danger now, simply because he had looked at me too many times. When the car stopped outside my apartment building, one of the security men stepped out immediately to open my door. "Miss Bennett," he said, respectfully. "Mr. Moretti asked that you call the number saved in your phone if anything unusual happens tonight." I froze halfway onto the sidewalk. He put his number in my phone? Yes, ma'am. Of course he did. Because apparently Adrian Moretti moved through life editing other people's realities whenever he felt like it. I glanced toward the dark street nervously before heading inside my building. The old hallway lights flickered softly overhead, while somebody's television echoed faintly through the walls upstairs. Usually my apartment building felt comforting in its imperfections. Tonight every shadow looked unfamiliar. Every sound made me pause. I locked my apartment door immediately after entering. Then I checked it again, 2 more times anyway. Midnight passed slowly. I tried reading, tried watching television, tried convincing myself I was overreacting. But fear changes the atmosphere of rooms. Even silence feels different afterward. Around 1:30 in the morning, my phone vibrated suddenly against the kitchen counter hard enough to make me jump. Unknown number. My stomach tightened instantly. I hesitated before answering. Hello? Silence. Soft breathing on the other end. Then the call disconnected. Cold spread through my chest immediately. A second later, another unknown number called again. I declined it this time. Then another, and another. By the 4th call, my hands were shaking badly enough that I nearly dropped the phone. Finally, I opened my contacts and found the number Adrian had apparently saved earlier beneath a single word. Adrian. No last name. No explanation. Just Adrian. I stared at it for 3 long seconds before pressing call. He answered immediately. Claire. No greeting. No hesitation. Like he had been awake, waiting beside the phone already. Someone keeps calling me. I hated how nervous I sounded. Unknown numbers. Adrian became silent for half a second. How many times? 4. Stay where you are. My pulse quickened. Adrian, lock your windows. His voice changed completely. Colder now. Controlled in a way that made my stomach drop. And do not answer any more calls. What is happening? Silence again. Then, finally, I need you to trust me for the next hour. The line disconnected before I could respond. I stood frozen in my kitchen staring at the phone in my hand, while rain started falling softly outside again. The city beyond my apartment windows suddenly felt huge and unfriendly. 30 minutes later, headlights swept across my bedroom wall from outside. I carefully moved toward the window and looked down into the street below. Black SUVs. 2 of them. Adrian stepped out onto the sidewalk wearing a dark overcoat despite the rain, one hand pressed briefly against an earpiece while security moved around him quickly. My heart stumbled hard against my ribs. He came here. The realization hit me all at once. Adrian Moretti had personally come across New York in the middle of the night because I told him somebody called my phone. I opened the apartment door before he even reached the 4th floor. Adrian appeared seconds later at the end of the hallway, beneath flickering yellow lights, his expression tense in a way I had never seen before. He looked relieved the second he saw me, standing there unharmed. Actually relieved. Did anyone enter the building? He asked immediately. No. Did you leave your apartment tonight? No. Adrian nodded once, while one of his security men checked the hallway behind him carefully. The entire atmosphere around him felt sharp tonight, alert, dangerous in a quieter way than before. You are scaring me, I admitted softly. Adrian looked at me then, really looked at me. Rainwater darkened the shoulders of his coat while exhaustion lingered beneath his eyes. I know. Something about the honesty in his voice made my fear worse instead of better. Tell me what is going on. He hesitated again. That almost never happened. The phone you returned that night contained information connected to my business. What kind of business? Adrian ignored the question completely. Certain people assumed anyone who touched that phone might know something valuable. But I do not know anything. I know that his jaw tightened slightly. Unfortunately, not everyone believes me. Cold moved slowly through my chest. Suddenly, all the strange moments from the last week rearranged themselves inside my head. The man outside my building, the message on Adrian's phone, the constant security. This is because of you, I whispered before I could stop myself. Adrian did not deny it. The silence between us answered instead. Anger mixed with fear inside me instantly. You should have stayed away from me. His eyes darkened slightly. I tried. The words hit harder than they should have. Adrian Clare. His voice lowered. Softer now. Tired. If I could undo the moment you found that phone, I would. I stared at him in disbelief, because somehow that hurt more than if he had sounded cold. Then why do you keep coming back? Another silence, heavy enough to feel physically. Adrian looked at me standing barefoot in the apartment doorway beneath weak hallway lights, like he was trying to fight something invisible inside himself. When he finally answered, his voice barely rose above the rain outside. Because you are the first good thing that has happened to me in a very long time. My breath caught completely, and for one dangerous second, I forgot to be afraid. Nobody tells you how quickly fear and affection can start sounding exactly the same. Adrian stood in the hallway outside my apartment beneath flickering yellow lights while rain whispered softly against the building windows. His words stayed suspended between us like something fragile. Because you are the first good thing that has happened to me in a very long time. I should have stepped back. I should have reminded myself this man carried danger around him like a second shadow. Instead, I found myself staring at him in silence while my heartbeat slowly betrayed every logical thought I had left. Adrian looked exhausted tonight. Not physically, something deeper than that. Like he had spent years carrying pressure too heavy for one person and had simply forgotten what it felt like to put it down. One of his security men appeared briefly at the end of the hallway before speaking quietly into an earpiece and disappearing downstairs again. Adrian barely noticed. His attention remained completely fixed on me. You should not stay here tonight, he said finally. Excuse me? Your apartment building is unsecured. I folded my arms tighter. You make it sound like I live in a war zone. I make it sound like somebody now knows where you sleep. The words sent cold fear through me all over again. Adrian stepped slightly closer, lowering his voice. Claire, I need you to understand something. Then explain it. I cannot explain everything. That is becoming very frustrating. For the first time since meeting him, Adrian looked genuinely conflicted, like there were things he wanted to say but knew he should not. There are people connected to my world, he said carefully, who assume proximity creates vulnerability, meaning if someone matters to me, they become noticeable. The hallway suddenly felt smaller, quieter. And I matter to you? I asked, before I could stop myself. Adrian held my gaze steadily, more than I intended. The honesty of it hit me harder than flirtation ever could have, because Adrian never sounded rehearsed, never charming on purpose. When he said things, they felt dragged out of him against his own will. "This is insane," I whispered softly. "A week ago, I was arguing with customers about blueberry muffins." Something softer moved through Adrian's expression then, almost affection. "And now?" I laughed nervously once. "Now a man who probably has a private army is standing outside my apartment at 2 in the morning." Adrian actually looked mildly offended. "It is not an army. That is the part you disagreed with?" One corner of his mouth moved briefly before fading again. God, it should have been illegal for dangerous men to have subtle humor. It made them impossible to categorize correct. Thunder rolled softly somewhere over the city while hallway lights buzzed overhead. Adrian glanced once toward my apartment door before looking back at me again. "Pack a bag." My stomach dropped. "What? Just for tonight?" "Absolutely not." "Claire." "No." I shook my head harder now. "You do not get to decide where I sleep." Adrian's expression remained calm, but I noticed his jaw tighten slightly. "I am trying to keep you safe. And I am trying to understand why this suddenly feels like my life is not my own anymore." Silence. Heavy silence. The kind that presses against your chest. Adrian looked at me for several long seconds before speaking again, quieter this time. "You are right." That surprised me enough to momentarily stop my anger. "What?" "I have handled this poorly." The admission sounded painfully sincere. "I am accustomed to solving problems quickly. By controlling everything around you." His eyes lowered briefly before returning to mine. "Usually." "Well, I am not one of your employees." "I know." "Or one of your bodyguards." "I know that too." "Then stop acting like you can rearrange my life whenever you want." Adrian became very still after that, not cold, hurt somehow, which felt impossible considering who he was. "Do you think that is what I am doing?" he asked quietly. "I think you are used to protecting things by locking them away." Another silence. Then finally, Adrian nodded once, slowly, like I had accidentally said something true. Perhaps. Rain continued against the windows, while distant sirens echoed through Queens below us. I suddenly realized how strange this entire moment was. Me, standing barefoot in old sweatpants, arguing with one of the most powerful men in New York in a dim apartment hallway at 2 in the morning. Nothing about my life felt recognizable anymore. Adrian exhaled slowly before speaking again. "I will station security outside your building tonight." Adrian, non-negotiable. There it is. His brow furrowed slightly. "What?" "That voice." I pointed at him lightly. "The one that sounds like the entire world obeys you automatically." To my surprise, that made him look almost embarrassed for half a second. "Old habit. You keep saying that like it excuses things." Adrian looked down briefly before saying something I never expected from him. "I am trying, Claire." My anger softened immediately despite myself, because suddenly he did not sound like Adrian Moretti, the feared businessman. He sounded like a man genuinely struggling to exist normally around someone he cared about, which was infinitely more dangerous to my heart. "You should get some sleep," I murmured finally. Adrian studied me carefully. "Will you call me if anything happens?" "You mean besides mysterious phone calls and random men following me?" Another tiny, almost smile. "Yes." I hesitated before nodding once. Relief moved subtly through his expression so fast I almost missed it. Then Adrian reached into his coat pocket and held out something small toward me. A slim silver card. No title, no company logo, just a phone number embossed across the center. "Direct line," he said quietly. "It rings to me only." I took the card carefully, our fingers brushing again for one brief second. Warm skin, steady hands, dangerous chemistry. Adrian's eyes lowered briefly toward my mouth, before immediately lifting back to my eyes again, like he caught himself doing it. The tiny movement sent heat unexpectedly through my chest anyway. "Good night, Claire." His voice had softened again. "Good night." Adrian turned then, dark coat, moving quietly beneath weak hallway lights, while his security team shifted downstairs outside the building entrance. I watched him walk away, longer than I should have, and somewhere deep down, beneath all the fear and confusion and danger surrounding him, I realized the most terrifying thing of all. I was starting to miss him before he had even left.